What's up guys, Legacy here, coming at you guys today with a new Counter Fairy deck profile. Counter Fairies are a control/stun based deck that use the effect of fairies and counter traps to generate advantage. And I really like this deck because it's a very unique back row deck. Its engine is not really like anything else that's around, and I've been having a lot of fun with this deck because the slogan of this deck is basically say no to your opponent, because you have a bunch of strong trap cards that negate your opponent's activated effects, and they also generate your advantage through the engine. So a lot of fun to play, and that being said, let's get right into it. So starting with the main deck, it's 40 cards. We play one Sacred Air Archknight Parshath. So this is the big boss monster of the deck, and how you get him out is if he's in your hand, you can banish 2 fairy monsters from your graveyard whenever a counter trap resolves, and you can special summon him to your side of the field. We play other ways to cheat him out, but if he's in your hand, then that's how you summon him. Basically, this card is infinite advantage for you as long as you keep attacking with him, because whenever he deals battle damage to your opponent, you can search one Parshath or counter trap card from your deck and put it in your hand. So you can basically search all your counter traps to answer whatever your opponents do every turn. Did I mention he also does piercing damage as well, so your opponent can't really just set cards to stop him. So we play one because more than one is bricky, and we have other ways to cheat him out, and what we really want to do is get him out and protect him. So 1 is the perfect number, and you always want to get this guy out and keep attacking with him to generate advantage and win the game. For the other monsters and the main engine of the deck, we play 3 Bountiful Artemis. So Bountiful Artemis is, again, a unique engine because she reads that whenever a counter trap is activated and resolves, you can draw 1 card. So that includes both you and your opponent's counter traps, but whenever you Solemn Strike someone, you activate any of your Solemn's counter traps, you tack on a plus, draw 1 card to that. And that's insane because your counter traps are already so powerful. They're usually trading like favorably 1 for 1, and then you get a draw 1 on top of that. We play 3 because, again, the main engine of the deck, you always want to see her in your opening hand, and yeah, not much else to say. You want to be normal summoning Bountiful Artemis. I play 2 Condemned Witch. So this card is basically another copy of 2 and more copies of Bountiful Artemis, because during your opponent's main phase, you can actually tag out with this card using its quick effect for any level 4 fairy monster. And conveniently, Bountiful Artemis is a level 4 fairy monster. So basically 2 more copies of Bountiful Artemis with an upside. Whenever you normal summon this card, you can search 1 forbidden spell from your deck and add it to your hand. So I play targets for this, of course, and just a +1 plus getting into your engine. This card is insane. I play 2 instead of 3 because I'm playing a Ties of the Brethren build. This is not a light fairy, so it doesn't really work with your Ties of the Brethren, and I don't really want to see 2 of these in my hand. Kind of clunks my hand. I'd rather see a light fairy in Ties or the Bountiful Artemis. So 2 is a good number for me. You can play 3, but I like 2 better because, again, I'm playing a Ties of the Brethren build. If you're not playing a Ties of the Brethren build, this is definitely a 3-0 because it gets you into your main engine. For more fairies, I play Guiding Ariane, 3 copies. So this card is really good because its spell effect is that basically you don't need to pay costs anymore to activate your counter traps. So if you guys didn't know, for Solemn Strikes, Solemn Judgments, you need to pay life points. You don't need to pay life. If you have this out, you don't need to pay life points to activate those. So really strong. You also don't need to discard to pay to activate counter traps, and that comes up with a couple other counter traps. So basically, it takes away the cost of activating your counter traps. It's a really good card. This monster effect also comes up sometimes because if it's destroyed by your opponent's card effect or battle, you can reveal 3 counter traps from your deck, and your opponent selects 1 for you to add to your hand. So it basically floats into a counter trap, which is pretty good. If it's destroyed, then you get some advantage out of it. The monster effect comes out a lot when you open this and Ties of the Brethren. So you normal summon this and you get your Ties of the Brethren on this. So you play 3 because both effects are pretty solid, and again, Ties of the Brethren target, and the spell effect is really good with counter traps. For the Ties of the Brethren package, I play 1 Barrier Statue of the Heavens, 1 Honest, and 1 Power Angel Valkyria. So I play a pretty minimal package. I was even considering cutting this Power Angel Valkyria because I feel like this is the least impactful card. But I know a lot of other builds, they play a lot more monsters than this. But I feel like I'm trying to play the minimum amount of monsters because I want to see my traps. I don't really want to see my monsters. I want to see a copy of Bountiful Artemis, and I want to see the rest are counter traps or traps. So I tried to cut down on the number of targets, and I think these 3 are the best. The Barrier Statue basically prevents anybody from summoning non-light, or prevents anybody from summoning non-light monsters. And this card surprisingly shuts down a lot of decks by itself. You'd be surprised. A lot of times I have this out, and I have the Honest backing it up, and my opponent can't get over this with a normal summon, and they just scoop because it shuts down basically all of their plays. Again, I play the Honest because to protect the Barrier Statue, and with Ties, you can get both of these out. You can use Honest effect to bounce it back to your hand, and then you have protection for your Barrier Statue against whatever your opponent might normal summon. So definitely plays these 2 together. Very powerful combo. Locks a lot of decks. That's kind of like the stun aspect of this deck. It locks a lot of decks out of basically all their plays. So I play the Power Angel because it searches your Bountiful Artemis. If you open up this and some counter traps, it basically reads that whenever like a activation of the spell trap card or monster effect is like negated, you can add a Light Fairy monster from your deck to your hand. So this gets you into your Bountiful Artemis, gets you into your Guiding Arion if you need that, gets you into one of these. So it's a pretty solid card even if you open this and a couple counter traps because you can search your engine. But I am considering cutting this because again I want to reduce the amount of monsters in this deck. But I think this package is pretty minimal already. So if you're gonna cut any of these, cut this one. But I still think this one is pretty good, so I keep them. But again, considering cutting it. For the last of the monsters, I play 3 Dimension Shifter as my only hand trap. So Dimension Shifter is one of the strongest hand traps out there because basically this is not a lot of decks can like create a solid board off of a Dimension Shifter, and this deck struggles a lot going second. And I include 3 Dimension Shifter because I think it's a very strong hand trap. What we do is we normal summon something, maybe Ties of the Brethren, and set a bunch of back row. So this doesn't really interfere with that plan, and it a lot of times really impairs our opponent. So I think it's a very powerful hand trap, and I definitely want to see this in my opening hand. So I play 3 of it. Now, Shifter is, again, really good, but it's kind of a brick if you top deck it or later on in the duel when you have cards in your graveyard. But I run 3. I run this card because I think that the power that it gives you to shut off your opponent's turn is it's definitely worth the risk of just top decking this because, again, this deck really struggles going second. So I played the 3 Dimension Shifters to round out the monsters. Going on to the spells, I've talked about it enough, but I play 3 Ties of the Brethren. So this is a Ties of the Brethren build. What this does is basically you pay 2,000 and then you target a monster on your side of the field. You skip your battle phase, but you can summon 2 monsters, special summon 2 monsters with the same attribute, type, and level. So if you didn't notice, all of our monsters are basically level 4 Light Fairies. So basically any level 4 Light Fairies turns into a Bountiful Artemis. If you open the Bountiful Artemis, I like summoning the Barrier Statue and the Honest, so you have your engine and the lockdown, which is really powerful. And another reason why I like playing Dimension Shifter is that you can actually chain block this with Dimension Shifter. This is a big Ash target because if you resolve this, you're in a really good position. A lot of times you just win the game off this. And if you open up this Dimension Shifter in a normal summon, you can normal summon your monster. You can activate Ties and then chain the Shifter to the Ties so it doesn't get ashed because this is a big Ash target. And then you get the effect of the Shifter and you get the Ties of the Brethren. This does shut off your Honest if you're going for the Barrier Statue play, but I think you really want to protect this from going off. So that's kind of another reason why I run Dimension Shifter, and this is a big, this is basically one of the win cards of this, win conditions of the deck. So I play 3 of them, of course. For the other spells, I play 1 Forbidden Chalice, 1 Card of Demise. I play the 1 Sanctum of Parshath. So the Forbidden Chalice is your search off your Condemned Witch, and it's another monster negate if you just draw it straight up. So I like this better than Droplets because this deck doesn't really aim to like OTK or anything, and the cost for Droplets is a lot of the times you can't really pay it using this deck. So Chalice is a lot more flexible, and the 400 attack gain actually comes up sometimes. For example, if you're trying to protect your Barrier Statue, well, I wouldn't recommend that, but if you're trying to protect your monsters or try to go for damage, the 400 attack comes up a lot. I play the 1 Card of Demise because it's a power card for any back row decks. A potential draw 3 is insane. You got to play this card. It's limited right now. I would play 3 of them if it wasn't limited, but you got to play this. This is pretty self-explanatory. I play the 1 Sanctum of Parshath because he's searchable off the big boss monster. And a lot of times you might want to search this guy if you already have a lot of counter traps and you want to protect them, because what this guy does is basically protects your set spells and traps. So you basically, if your opponent tries to Feather Duster you or Twin Twister you, they have to target this first before they get to your Solemns and such. So I play 1 because if you draw it, it's not too bad because it can protect all your traps, but a lot of times you're searching him off the Parshath because you want to protect your traps that you already have. He also buffs all your fairies by 300, which can come up. All your fairies have pretty low attack values, so it can come up. But yeah, it's just more of a benefit rather than protection. That's it for the spells. Now getting into the good part, we're getting into the traps. So I'll start with the counter traps. I play 3 Solemn Judgment. Pretty self-explanatory. Negates summons, negates spell and traps. Always live because you pay half your life points. Really good card. I play 3 Solemn Strike. Again, pretty standard. A lot of decks use this. Negate your opponent's monster effects, negate special summons. Really good. I only play 2 Solemn Warning because, again, as I said, this deck kind of struggles going second, and this card doesn't really do that much for you going second. I'm considering cutting this down to 1. I like having 1 on counter traps because I can search it off the Parshath, but again, this card just doesn't seem as good as the other 2, because the other 2 are more flexible and more powerful. So I play 2 because I think it's weaker than the other 2, and I'm considering cutting it down to 1. But Solemn Brigade, 10 cards, pretty self-explanatory. Super powerful counter traps. For the 1 of counter traps, I play 1 Broken Line, 1 Ultimate Providence, and 1 Drastic Drop-Off. So Broken Line is basically a searchable Solemn Strike because you can just set it through your opponent's monster negate. Going second, you can set it in the column of your opponent's monster negate or set spell and trap card. And if you guys don't know what this does, basically it negates anything in this column, and it's a counter trap. So it's basically a 4th copy of Solemn Strike going second. It's not that good going first, but you can also try to set it in your opponent's extra monster zone. If you know you're playing a deck that uses the extra monster zone. Again, all these 1-ofs I play because they're all searchable off the Parshath. Ultimate Providence is really good because we're playing the Guiding Arion. This basically is a Solemn Judgment. If you can discard, you basically negate anything that you can discard. So if you discard a monster, if you activate this, discard a monster, you can discard it. You can negate a monster effect, sorry. But it's really good with the Guiding Arion because you don't need to discard, and it negates everything basically. So again, you want to search this if you have the Guiding Arion off your big guy. But otherwise, he's live if you keep a card in your hand. Drastic Drop Off because it's always live. You discard whatever your opponent draws, and it's a free +1 because you discard whatever your opponent draws, and if you have Bountiful Artemis, then you draw a card. It's always live. It's really good in simplified game states, so a really good one-of in my opinion. I played 2 Rebirths of Parshath for the last counter traps. This is how we cheat out the big guy. So this is basically a Omni Negate counter trap form for, but the thing is you need to reveal a counter trap in your hand, pay 1,000, and discard a card from your hand. So the cost is very steep for this card, but on return you get the best sort of removal. It actually shuffles the card back into the deck, and you can cheat out a Parshath monster, which is usually the big guy right here. So really good card when you can get it off, but the cost is kind of steep, so I only play 2 of them. I don't play 3 because I think 3 is too bricky. But when you resolve this and you get your big guy out, and you negate your opponent, and you shuffle the card back into the deck, this card can be very powerful. For the rest of the cards, I'm playing 6 normal traps. I'm playing 3 copies of Crackdown, and the 3 copies of Dogmatic Punishment. So I'm playing these 6 because, again, this deck kind of struggles going second, and these 2 cards are really good going first or second, because if you have any of these cards alongside a strike, then you can break a lot of boards, because you can activate one of these cards and then strike your opponent's monster negation, and then they can't respond to that unless they have a counter trap. So these are flexible going first or second, and then with your Solemns, really solid. I choose these specifically because Dogmatic Punishment with the Elder Entity Entis is flexible, and it's a 2-for-1. And Crackdown is all you can use your opponent's monsters for your own link plays. So I choose these because of the advantage that they get over other traps. I was playing Compulse, but Compulse isn't, again, it doesn't really generate you advantage. It does get rid of a threat normally, but I like getting advantage with this deck more over anything else, and this deck is designed for that, so I play these over other traps. I would consider playing Ice Dragon's Prism if I wasn't playing Dimension Shifter, but Shifter kind of conflicts with that. And these can also be 6 hand traps, but I like the trap package because this is a trap based deck, and these are very flexible. So going first or second traps, and that'll round down the main deck. So for the extra deck, I'll start with the links. I play 1 Celestial Night Lord Parshath, 1 Lyn of the Light Charmer. So this is, sometimes I'm summoning this off the Rebirth, but he's basically a searcher for any fairy or Sanctuary in the Scar or Sanctuary in the Sky in the deck. If you got the Sanctum out, basically you can search any fairy. He's not as good as the big boss monster in my opinion, but I have him as an option. I play the Lena because she synergizes a lot with his deck, because it's, for example, I'm playing Crackdown, so a Crackdown and any normal summon is Lena, and she floats into anything from the deck like Guardian Beyond or your Barrier Statue. So Lena's a pretty powerful card in this deck. For the other links, I play 1 Unicorn and 1 Phoenix. Again, Crackdown makes these cards pretty good because a lot of times you can crack down your opponent, go into Lena, revive a light from their grave, go into Unicorn, and get rid of a threat. Or just straight up Crackdown, normal summon into the Phoenix. So toolbox links that are really good with the advantage that this deck does. I'm playing Stardust Dragon and the Wooden Pegasus at Ignister. This is a Dogmatic Punishment target, and I'm playing this because I'm playing 3 Starlight Road in the side. So I have this for the Starlight Road. Not much else to say there. Again, the Entis, and I play the Blue Eyes Ultimate Dragon because I like having this card. It's just funny when I send this off the punishment. But this is just basically for big attack monsters that your opponent might have. It's technically better to play the 5-headed dragon or something with 5k attack, but I play this because I have it. And the Entis again is a 2-for-1 pop with punishment. For the Exceeds and rounding out the deck, I play the Utopia package, Utopia Prime, and Lightning. This is the deck's only out to Dragoon pretty much, and it's good for just getting rid of a threat. So 2 level 4 fairies make this, you can just get over a threat. For the other XYZs, I play 1 Abyss Dweller, pretty good against most decks. Castel, again, spot removal. Tornado Dragon for the spell and trap removal, pretty self-explanatory, toolbox 4s. And I play the 1 fairy Cheer Girl. So what this card does, if you have 2 fairies, you can go into this, and then once per turn you can detach 1 to draw a card. So another draw engine, digs you for stuff you might need if you have 2 fairies, and synergizes with ties. Because if you ties, you'll have 2 fairies to go into this. So yeah, that's the deck. I really like the deck. I wouldn't really make that many changes to it other than the 6 traps are kind of flex spots. You can place hand traps there and the dimension shifters. You have spots for 9 hand traps to help going second, or I like playing the traps because it's a trap focused deck, but those really are 9 flex spots. But the rest of the deck I've really like streamlined down. I told you I've cut the monsters. You can consider cutting the Valkyria, but I would definitely keep the Honest and the Statue because I think that's a really strong combination. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed. This deck is really enjoyable to play because you just say no to your opponent. You just counter trap everything they do. And hope you guys enjoyed, and I'll see you guys in the next one.